शुरू कर दिया।
We'll wait for some time, right?
Ma'am, I think all have come, ma'am.
Okay.
Sairam to everyone. It has been long time. We have not met, ma'am. So I think today we were waiting for today's class. So it is actually those 2 classes which you have taken. Actually, that time gap which we got now, actually we went back and we studied all those things. So I think everybody is prepared for today's class. So I hand it over to you for today's class, ma'am.
Thank you. And namaste to everybody. We can start with Sahana Vavatu. You can chant with me. Om Sahana Vavatu Sahano Bhunaktu Sah Viryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavadhitamastu ma vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. So nice to see you, everybody, once again. I missed being with you last 2 Thursdays. And I requested Bhupalji to share their recording, and I saw that I was too serious in that first session. And I was wondering that, we don't need to be serious when we are exploring Brahma Vidya, because, what can be more joyous than being with the divine, right? So let's make it less serious and more enjoyable and fun this time. So last time we explored the first 3 verses of the Isha Upanishad, which I told you that Sri Aurobindo calls it the first movement. And today we will take up the second movement, which are the verses number 4, 5, 6, and 7. So what the second movement does is it explains in greater detail the first verse of the first movement. So basically the first verse, which was Isha Vasyam Idam Sarvam Yat Kincha Jagatyam Jagat Tena Tyaktena Bhunjita Magridha Kasyas Vidhanam. This verse is being further explained by the Rishi in the following 4 verses, which we will take up today. Before we take up the verses for today, there is something important about Isha that I wanted to tell you. That Isha is, as I told you, one of the smallest Upanishads, but one of the most powerful. And it is so powerful that even somebody like Gandhiji told that if India was to lose all its spiritual literature and still have the first verse of the Isha, it would still have retained its entire spiritual, tradition and heritage. That's how powerful it is. And why is it powerful? Is because in its 18 verses, it is reconciling 9 almost irreconcilable principles. Okay, there are, and we will see which are these principles. So in the first 3 verses, it is the principles that are reconciled are God and the world, right? So Isha and Jagati, Yat Kincha Jagatyam Jagat and Isha. So Lord and nature. The second principle is karma and freedom from karma. And the third reconciliation is renunciation and enjoyment. And how so? So Lord and nature are 2 opposite entities, it appears, to our senses, right? Nature is phenomenal. It is changing all the time. It is moving all the time. Whereas the Brahman is one and stable, as we will see in the verses today. Okay, so one second. So, is it clear? God and nature has been reconciled. How? By saying that all here is for the inhabitation of the Lord. Means nature is for the inhabitation of the Lord. That is the reconciliation. That nature is not different from Lord. Prakriti is not different from Brahman. The Jagat is not different from Isha. It is Isha that has become the Jagat. So, this is the first massive reconciliation, because all spiritual philosophies are about how to bridge this gap. There is nature on one hand, life on one hand, and renunciation and Brahman on the other. The second renunciation that the second reconciliation that has been done in the first three verses is between karma and freedom from karma. We know that karma leads to future karma, right? Because even we discussed last time that every action has a consequence. That consequence has a further consequence and then a consequence, and we stay in this whole cycle of birth and death, of happiness and suffering, and we can never escape from this world. But Isha very beautifully in the second verse says that how it is only in action, na karma lipyate nare. It is only in action that we can have, that we are not attached to action, provided what is the reconciliation? The reconciliation is that the action is not grounded in desire, but it is grounded in the will of the divine. It is not asking us to not have action. So that was the earlier solution which others gave, that the only way to escape this action and karma is to abstain from action. But Isha says that it is not practical to abstain from action. And the only way that we can really escape karma is to do action based in the divine. Our will, personal will, should not be based in ego and desire, but in the will of the divine. Whatever the divine wants us to do, like Arjuna in the battlefield, if we do, then even when we have done serious, killing like Arjuna, still action will not stick to us. So that was the second reconciliation. The third reconciliation is between tena tyaktena bhunjitha, between renunciation and enjoyment. Okay, so the Isha says that it is only by renunciation that we can have true enjoyment. And here I would like to tell you how Sri Aurobindo differs from Shankaracharya, because Shankaracharya interprets it as by renunciation let us enjoy, means let us enjoy the renunciation, is what Shankaracharya is saying. Let us enjoy that renunciation. But Sri Aurobindo is interpreting it differently. It is not that you enjoy the renunciation, because God has not made this world for us to renounce it. He would not have made such a diversity, so much of beauty, if the aim was renunciation and nirvana. So the aim is enjoyment. It is bhukti after mukti, but not before mukti. So tena tyaktena bhunjitha, by and renouncing all, we must enjoy all, because the Sat through Chit has made this world for Ananda. The final aim is Ananda, is enjoyment. It is Mukti is a condition, is a precondition for that Bhukti. As we discussed, if we are always in attachment, if we are not renounced, we can never enjoy. Because when we don't have it, we are anxious to have it. And when we have something, we are scared to lose it. So only when we have detachment, inner renunciation, it is not outer renunciation. It is not going away to the monasteries or caves. Not that renouncement, but inner renouncement. Like while being in this world, We work not for ourselves, but for the will of the divine. So these three were reconciled. There are 6 more such things which are reconciled, and that is why Isha Upanishad becomes one of the most beautiful Upanishads, because this seemingly opposite things, it seamlessly and beautifully reconciles. Okay, so with that background, let us move on to the second movement, and I will share my screen so that you can easily follow the verses. I'm sure you know these verses by heart, but let us go to the fourth verse. Okay. So the fourth verse is Aneja dekam manaso javyo nainad deva apnuvan purvamashat tat dhavatah anyanati tishtat tasmin napo matarishva dadhati. So there are many concepts here. We will take it up one by one. So as I said, the fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh verses explain the first verse, and the fourth and fifth verses explain the first line of the first verse of who is Isha. Okay, so Isha Vasyamidam Sarvam. So who is Isha? Who is this Lord? Who is Brahman? Is explained here. So Brahman is Anejat, one that is unmoving. He is not moving, Anejat. And he is one, Ekam. So how is he Ekam? Because all that we see manifested here is Brahman. There is no another. There is no second. So there is nobody other than Brahman. Everything that we see is the progressive self-limitation of this Brahman. So the Brahman decides, because it is all powerful, it can decide to be powerless. Because it is infinite, it can decide to be finite. Because it is limitless, it can decide to be limited. So for instance, the Brahman can decide through progressive self-limitation that it has to become this mountain here or this leaf here. Okay, so therefore he is one. So you, me, an ant, a worm, the galaxies, stars, everything is Brahman in its essence. So it is not one numerically, it is essentially one. Otherwise, how do you explain the many if he's just one numerically? So Brahman is one and he's anejat. He's not moving. Now, how do we understand he's not moving? So we have seen that within it, the Jagatyam Jagat, the worlds are moving, right? Atoms are moving, electrons are moving, galaxies are moving, but he is not moving. How is that possible? It is possible, right? Look at all of you. You are all sitting there, right? You're not moving. But within you, your blood is circulating, your heart is beating, right? Your brain is functioning. So much is happening physiologically, but you are stable, you are moving. So, similarly, all that is happening in the relative sense, in space and time, is happening inside of this Brahman because he is beyond space and time. Okay? The whole thing is the body of the Brahman, and within it, the movement of galaxies, stars, everything is happening, but as a whole, it is unmoving. So it is one, it is unmoving. Then it is manaso javyo. It is swifter than the mind. Okay, we consider that our minds are the highest instruments that God has made. And we think we can, like become the masters of the world. But Brahman is swifter than the mind. And the same thing is brought out in the Kena Upanishad when it says that which the mind cannot know, but through which the mind is known. Okay, so it is swifter than the mind because mind can never reach to the Brahman. So we cannot reach the Brahman through the mind. It is swifter than the mind. Na enat deva apnuvan. It is that thing, Brahman, which the gods can never reach. Okay. Now, who are these gods? In the Vedas, we have Indra and we have Vayu, and in the Upanishads, we have the gods. So these gods are actually the typal worlds, the typal beings, which are our faculties of consciousness. Okay. So Indra is, for instance, our mind when it becomes divinized. Similarly, Ganesha is the power in us to overcome every obstacle. It is not an outside Ganesha who will come and help us. It is our power within that can overcome obstacle through knowledge. That is Ganesha. So gods are all our faculties of consciousness, all our senses. So it is not only swifter than the mind, it is also something which our faculties of consciousness can never reach, which means we cannot reach it through our senses. Our senses cannot reach it. It is beyond the senses. But the senses become enlightened because of it. Okay. And why cannot the gods or the mind reach it? Because it is Purva Marshat. It always is in the front. It always progresses in the front. Brahman is always ahead. No? Tat dhavata anyanati tishtat. So even if it is tishtat, it is standing, it is beyond others who are running. The gods who are running all the time, which means that they are expressing themselves in space and time. Okay. But the divine, the Brahman, is that one which is unmoving and which is standing, and yet these gods cannot go past it, even though they are running and he's standing. And tasmin apo matarishwa dadhati. So there are important terms here, apaha and matarishwa. And to explain this, I will just maybe project something. But Matarishwa is the life principle. It is the Vayu. Vayu is the physical form of it, but it is the prana, the life force. In this Brahman, Tasmin, in this Brahman, Matarishwa, Apaha Dadhati, establishes the waters. Now, these are not, these texts are very symbolic, in their view. They are not logical writings of some writer. These are experiences of the rishis, and they have been revealed through Shruti and Drishti, through hearing, inspired word, and revelation. So, Apaha is the waters. Now, what is the symbolism of the waters? In the Vedas, the waters are also the streams of consciousness. And the Vedas talk about the 7 waters. And these are the 7 streams of consciousness. And what are these streams? Do you know about? So these are the 7 streams of consciousness. We know of the 3 streams. Okay. The 3 streams, which is the lower world of ignorance, is our body, matter, life, our emotions, the life principle, and the mind. These are the 3 waters. And the 3 higher principles are Sat, Chit, Ananda. These are the 3 waters of the higher hemisphere. And these are the counterparts of the lower hemisphere. And in between, there is the Vijnanamaya Purusha. So this is the Sat Purusha, the Chit Purusha, Ananda Purusha. We have in one of the Upanishads, Annamaya Kosha or Anna Maya Purusha, Pranamaya Purusha, Manomaya Purusha, Vijnanamaya Purusha, and Satchidananda. So these are the planes of consciousness. These are the planes of existence. When the Purushottama, when decided to make this world out of himself, he gradually made the 7 stairs, and this is called the process of involution. So the life principle, Matarishwan, established these waters, these 7 streams of the being. And then our evolution started from matter to life to mind and so on. So what this is saying is that in this Samam Brahman, because the one that is unmoving is Samam Brahman. It does not have any qualities. It is just one existence. It has nothing in it, no manifestation. In that one unmoving Brahman, the life principle, Matarishwan, established these waters, these 7 streams of consciousness. In the Vedas, these are called the 7 rivers. Okay, so this is this thing. So who is that Isha Vasyam Idam Sarvam? Who is that Isha? He is all of this. Now, verse 5 further goes on to explain again about Brahman. Tadejati tannejati tad dure tadvantike tadantarasya sarvasya tadu sarvasyasya bahyatah. So tat ejati, that which moves. Tat na ejati, that does not move. Tat dure, that which is far. Tat vantike, that which is near as well. Tadantarasya sarvasya, that which is inside everything. Tadu sarvasyasya bahyatah, that which is also outside of everything. So which means that this Brahman is beyond all dualities. Why it is moving and not moving? Because movement happens in space and time, right? It is beyond space and time. Brahman creates space and time in his being. He is beyond space and time. He is beyond relativity. Therefore, he is moving, he is not moving. He is far, he is near. He is inside everything. He is also outside of everything. So this is Brahman. And if you are finding it difficult to understand, that's exactly the previous verse was saying, that it is swifter than the mind, that the mind cannot understand it. So therefore, why are we studying it? So even Arjuna is in the Bhagavad Gita, he is taught by Krishna, and he is given this knowledge of the Sankhya before he is given the knowledge of the yoga and karma yoga. So before we embark on this sadhana, this spiritual discipline, it is important to understand in our minds. Okay. And that is why, but because mind is our highest instrument, what else can we understand it with? But once the mind has understood, then the consciousness within us, we start working in our consciousness through yoga. And that is what, just give me a moment, I'll get my charger. Okay. Is it clear till now? So, the first verse of the Isha, which is Isha Vasyam Idam Sarvam Yat Kincha Jagatyam Jagat, that all that is moving in the moving universe has to be inhabited by the Lord, is explained by these 2 verses. That who is this Lord and what is his relationship with the world, and how the one has become the many. And before we move on to the other 2 verses today, there are two ideas here which are being reconciled here. We discussed three ideas that were reconciled in the first movement: God and nature, renunciation and enjoyment, and karma and freedom from karma. Here, the two ideas that are being reconciled are the stable and the moving. Okay, the one divine, the stable, anejat, unmoving. And we discussed how within it everything is moving, but it is stable. Okay, and the second idea that has been reconciled here is one and the many. How can this one, ekam, become the many? Is the many one? And in this one and many, there are so many philosophies. This Advaita, Vishishta Advaita, Dvaita. Each one proposes that one is true, the other is not true. That the one is true, many is an illusion. Some say that one is also true, many is also true. So, what is Sri Aurobindo saying is that he is beyond, he is both one and the many. Brahman is one that has become the many, but this many is not an illusion of our senses. It is this Brahman itself who has become the many. So, this is not Maya, this is not illusion, the many, the multiplicity of the world. What makes us consider this as Maya is avidya. And we will come to that in our next Thursday session. Avidya is this knowledge of multiplicity without having the knowledge of the one. So that makes this appear like an illusion. But actually, the one is the many. So these are the 5 reconciliations so far, and we have 4 more to go in the following verses. Now we move on to verse 6. So the second line of the first verse says, Tena tyaktena bhunjitha magridha kasya svidhanam. That by renouncing all, enjoy all. And do not try to possess other people's possessions. Now, how is that possible? How by renouncing all can we enjoy all? So this line is explained in the next 2 verses. So it says, Yastu sarvani bhutani atmanyevanupashyati sarvabhuteshu chatmanam tato na vijugupsate. Yaha, tu, one, who pashyati, sees, sarvani bhutani, in all the existences, atmani eva, sees the same self in all existences, sees the same Brahman in all the existences, and sarva bhuteshu chatmanam, and all existences in that self, tato na vijugupsate. He therefore does not recoil from anything. Now, this is a very powerful shloka because, these 2 main problems of human life are fear and greed. The 2 main expressions of the ego in the world is fear and greed. And where do fear and greed come from? What do we fear? Do we fear ourselves? We always fear another person, right? Another being or something outside of ourselves. And what do we greed after? We greed after something we don't consider it is ours. It is outside of us. But when we start seeing our true self, so we have a egoistic self, that is the small s, and we have the true self, capital S, the Atman and the soul within. When we first see that true self in us and live from there and see that essential self in everything, then we have grown from an individual consciousness to a cosmic consciousness. We have become this whole universe. We have become Isha. And when we become this whole conscious, this whole universe, can we fear anything? Vijugupsate. Do we recoil from anything? Do we shrink from anything? No. Like when we consider our family as ourselves extended, no? We look at our family as we have been, our children, our parents, our self extended. We never fear our children or our parents. We experience love, which is the opposite of fear. So a person who grows from individual consciousness to cosmic consciousness has grown to become the Isha, and he does not recoil from anything. And the same idea is further explored in the next shloka, that Yasmin Sarvani Bhutani Atme Va Bhut Vijanatah Tatra Kah Moha Kah Shokah Ekatvam Anupashyata. Yasmin, in whom all the beings, all the existences have become the self. Okay. And how it has become? Through Vijanatah. Because he has perfect knowledge. And this perfect knowledge is the knowledge of reality as it is. I don't know if we discussed we discussed in the last class that how this thing that we look at it as a phone and as something solid, which appears to us in our reality, this is something solid. But quantum physics says that this is 99.9% empty space. So this is not our true perception of reality, right? But because we are now using our logical minds to understand and our senses to collect the data. But when we grow in knowledge and we achieve perfect knowledge, then we can see that all that is unfolding in the world, all this becoming, it is actually the Brahman that is become all these becomings, that has become all of this. And when one sees that oneness everywhere, ekatvam anupashyatah, tatra kaha moha kaha shokah, he neither has any delusion or any attachment nor any grief. Because as we discussed, both this fear or grief and attachment or greed comes because we think we are different from the other. So we fear the other, or we feel that the other person has it, or it is outside of me, so I should have it. That is the origin of greed. But when you become, just imagine you've become this whole universe and you're in possession of this whole universe, because Isha Vasyam Idam Sarvam, all this has to be for the possession of the Isha, and you have grown to the stature of Isha. You will neither fear anybody because there is nobody other than you. You have become one. Aneja Tekam, you have become one. There is no another for you to fear. No shokah, no grief, no suffering, because all suffering comes from others. And there is no moha, no attachment or greed, because there is nothing outside that you have to acquire. All is in your self possession. So only when we grow into our cosmic selves, our universal selves, our spiritual selves, and we become one with the universe, we become the universe. And it is a stage possible for all of us to achieve. It has been achieved in the past. And there is a small exercise you can start from today to start practicing this. You can just start looking at everything and imagine that Brahman is in everything, because that is the reality. And imagination is a very powerful faculty which God has given only man. Animals don't have it. They only live on their instincts. But man has a capacity to create, to imagine. Okay. So even though we don't have the experience right now, let us imagine everything you see around you, everybody you see around you from today till next week, consciously practice that there is Brahman in everything. Okay, that is the first stage. Look at Brahman in everything. Try to see Brahman in everything. The second stage is look at everything in Brahman, because he is one and he is stable and unmoving. So all that is happening is in Brahman. So the second stage is look at everything in Brahman. So first is Brahman in everything, second is everything in Brahman. And the third exercise is to see everything as Brahman, because there's nothing else. So you will, when you start practicing this, you will see that if you're standing in the airport in a queue, you will not like to jump the queue, because the other person you're trying to go in front is your own being, is your own self. He's not anybody else. You will not feel angry on somebody, because if that person has not come up to your expectation, he's just your part. It's like your hand, right? You're never angry if your hand cannot paint something, because it is your hand and you try to train it to paint. You get angry with your friend because you think she is not you. So when you start practicing this, you start growing in empathy, you start growing in compassion. These are the first signs of becoming from an individual to a cosmic being. And the only way we can tena tyaktena bhunjitha, by renouncing, this is what is meant. True renunciation is to grow into the stature of Isha, because you are that cosmic consciousness, and in that consciousness you renounce everything, because there is no need to have, because everything is in your being. Okay, so this is the second movement, and I think instead of being a one-way track, let me ask you if you have any things to share, if anything has come to your mind, or if you have any questions. Is it understandable? Is it too tough?
I request everyone, if you have any questions, please come forward to the camera and you can ask, ma'am.
So when there is silence, it either means you've understood everything or you've understood nothing. I hope it is the first one. Sorry?
How Ishavasya Upanishad helps in sustainable development.
Okay. Yeah. So the sustainable as a word is become very fashionable right now. You know, last maybe 5-10 years, after all the developed countries have, you know, mined every possible mineral and every possible petroleum and all of that. But automatically, Isha, the consciousness of Isha, helps us to be sustainable, because you are one with nature and one with the world. So you don't look at nature as a resource that has to be exploited or to be used to further yourself, but you are one with nature. It is your mother. You are a part of it. It is you. So you would automatically, you know, treat it with respect and with care and with a lot of gratitude. And it is not only sustainable, it is regenerative. The difference between sustainable is that what you take is what you give, zero sum game. But regenerative means you take from nature less than what that nature is capable of producing. So always nature is abundant and more, you know. You don't take from nature more than what it is capable of regenerating. So it is not just sustainable development, it is regenerative development it promotes. And it's very interesting you asked this question, because if you look at the concept of nature in the Western thought and in Indian thought, there is a marked difference, you know. Even in the best of writers like Shakespeare, who is considered one of those great, iconic writers of modern times, even by Sri Aurobindo, you see nature as an adversary, that has to be overcome. Like in The Tempest, it is a storm, or in Macbeth, it is these three witches, the nature is coming as three witches. So nature is always something to be feared, or something to be dominated, or something to be controlled. But if you look at the Indian philosophy, Indian consciousness, right from the Vedas, where all the natural, elements, the sun, Surya Savitri, Vayu, Indra, all of them are considered as godheads. Even in the Vedanta, in the Puranas, all the gods have an animal as their Vahana. So there is this oneness with nature, with animals and plants. Even in Kalidasa's Shakuntala, or Meghadutam. Meghadutam is about 4 seasons. It celebrates nature. Nature is not feared or not looked upon as an adversary. Even in, let us say, Abhigyana Shakuntalam, when Shakuntala lives in the forest, after she wakes up every morning, she first waters the tulsi plant. We all do that in our homes, right? First thing is we water the tulsi plant even before we drink it, because we are so one with that nature. We consider that plant as more important than us. When Sita and Ram, they go to the forest, not for a moment are they missing their kingdom or the palace. In many places, Sita says that she's so happy to be in this forest, in this hermitage, and so on. So nature, forest, all of these in the Indian consciousness are looked upon as mother, and Prakriti or Shakti. There is a divinity in it, and we are all part of it. There is this oneness, the consciousness of oneness. So that, as I said, not only leads to a sustainable development with nature, but a more regenerative development. That is how Indian thought helps to maintain balance with nature as well. Yeah, so how do tenets of Sri Aurobindo differ from classical Advaita? So Advaita proceeds from neti, neti, neti. This is not Brahman, this is not Brahman. And considers the world as illusion or Maya, and enlightenment or realization is achieving this Brahmanic consciousness, which is not engaged in the world. But Sri Aurobindo's philosophy is not life negating. It is not neti neti. It says iti iti, maybe, if you can say that. It is life affirming spirituality. It does not say that this is not Brahman, and this is not Brahman, my body is not Brahman. It proceeds differently. It says this is also Brahman, I am also Brahman, this body is also Brahman. So it is one, but I am also Brahman. Advaita says that it is one, and that is Brahman. So that is the basic difference, but we will take it up in more detail in the subsequent sessions, when we discuss Vidya and Avidya, and birth and non-birth, and all these concepts in the coming following verses. So this was a question asked, which I replied to, if others were not aware of what I was talking. So there was a question that how do the core tenets of Sri Aurobindo's philosophy differ from classical Advaita?
I think there are no more questions, ma'am.
Okay. So we will do this practice, right? Seeing everything, Brahman in everything, everything in Brahman, and everything as Brahman. Because as I told in the first session, that a philosophy is as good as it is lived. You know, just knowing it can make us scholars, but it does not impact the world. It does not change us. So for this to be a transformative experience, let us take away everything and make it a part of our lives. Okay. So look around you. Can you do that? Just look at each other and see Brahman in everybody. You know, this person may be so and so, there can be a Nama Rupa, form, name, but it's all Brahman. So when I was practicing this, that everything is Brahman, and to me, I connect Brahman with Shiva. Okay, it is my Ishta Devata or something. So I went to New Zealand and I was doing skydiving from 15,000 feet. You know, you just jump, and then midway the parachute is supposed to open. So I just told myself that in case the parachute does not open, it's okay. You know, I'm jumping into the arms of Shiva, right? Because there is nothing else. The air that is there into which I'm going to fall is the arms of Shiva. The earth on which the body is going to go and smash itself, the Mother Earth, is Brahman. So there's nowhere to go. You go back into Brahman and then come back again. That's it. So what's the fear? And it was a very liberating experience. And because maybe there was no fear, the parachute also opened and I'm in front of you today, alive. So, and then when I came back, I was those days watching this Devon Ke Dev Mahadev, and I was at that particular episode where Shiva is teaching Kartikeya how to become a warrior. And this Kartikeya is this little boy, you know, and Shiva takes him to the top of a mountain and tells him jump into this river below. And then Kartikeya is obviously scared because he's a small child. And then Shiva tells him that if you are scared, any fear, you cannot be a warrior. And that's how his training starts. And at the end of it, after several years, his training finishes when he jumps off that mountain into the river. So when there is that full, trust and confidence in the divine, and that full awareness of this cosmic consciousness, there's no fear because you're jumping into. But don't try to do that if you have mountains around you, because the other thing we must also exercise is common sense. No. So unless we are trained like Kartikeya or we have a parachute, don't try to jump. Okay. So on that note, let us complete with again. Om Sahana Vavatu Sahano Bhunaktu Sah Viryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavadhitamastu ma vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you. See you next week.
We'll surely practice whatever the exercise which you have told. We'll surely practice and we'll be waiting for the next class, ma'am.
Okay. Look forward to meeting you. Bye.
Thank you.